You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Tonight, masajids across Canada are opening their doors for the first time in 2 years for Salat al-Tarawih as Ramadan begins. We at Canadian Muslim News wish you all a Ramadan Kareem. May God accept our fast and make it easy for us. Today, a conversation about Islamic geometric art with artist GILLIAN. But first, some news headlines. Pope Francis delivers official apology to Indigenous people. Human Rights Watch appeals Trudeau to repatriate Canadian Muslims detained in Syrian camps. University of Saskatchewan MSA accuses school of institutional racism. And Sri Lanka imposes curfew in capital after protests over economic crisis. And now the details. Pope Francis apologizes for the harms church-run residential schools have inflicted on Indigenous peoples. He has been meeting with Indigenous delegates at the Vatican this week. In a live-streamed gathering of over 190 Indigenous members, the Pope says that the stories of abuse and intergenerational trauma has him deeply grieving and experiences feeling of indignation and shame. 6 members of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops were with him while he asked for forgiveness. The Pope has not made clear whether he will deliver another apology from Canada, as requested by several Indigenous groups. Human Rights Watch is calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to repatriate the nearly 4 dozen people held unlawfully in a northeastern Syrian prison camp. Canada's effort to repatriate these citizens has been piecemeal at best, even though it has an obligation under international law to bring these people home, they say. This is despite Kurdish forces who run the camp urging the government to initiate the process. The United States has offered to help. The organization notes Trudeau celebrates Ramadan with Canadian Muslims and says that this is a good time to show his support to the community. University of Saskatchewan Muslim Student Association and the Muslim Chaplaincy are accusing the university of institutional Islamophobia. According to MSA President Abdirahman Ali Khalif, the university concluded that Ramadan does not fit its criterion of a religious holiday, reported local media. Ali Khalif says this is like an ultimatum to the students, their faith or their exam. Jay Wilson, the interim vice provost teaching, learning and student experience, said in a statement that the university does recognize the importance of Ramadan and has offered accommodations to several students. Sri Lanka has imposed a curfew in the capital Colombo after hundreds of protesters tried to storm the private residence of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Protesters blame Rajapaksa for the country's current economic crisis, which has led to 13-hour power cuts, a lack of food, medicine, and other essential items. What began as a peaceful protest turned violent as the police fired tear gas, water cannons, and beat the protesters. The curfew is in place until further notice. Sri Lanka is facing a severe economic crisis with $7.3 billion in domestic and foreign loans, far exceeding the $2.31 billion in national reserve. And that's it for the news. Our next guest says that after she encountered Islamic art, almost everything she's done since then is Islamic geometry. Welcome to the show, GILLIAN. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So please tell us about that first encounter.
Well, it really came through, it was a byproduct of encountering the religion of Islam. You know, I've always been an artist. I've always worked with my hands, but very much within a Western tradition. And completely separate from that, I started reading books about Islam, and I decided that I would study Arabic language. And it was through those books that I started seeing these geometric patterns. And probably about 2 years into that study, I decided I wanted to just see what was underneath those patterns, see how they worked. And I think it would be very quick exploration, and it just became everything that I did since then.
So I understand that you're a convert to Islam like me. Did the conversion happen before or after your encounter with the Islamic art?
I don't really know the answer to that question. I think it happened very gradually over a long period of time, that it was something that I just started taking more and more seriously, and I realized it wasn't going away.
I also gather that you've been to Spain to study Islamic art. So can you please tell us, like, why Spain and what it was like?
We chose Spain because we felt like we had the easiest access to it in terms of being able to live there, and it was, you know, primarily just studying the patterns in situ. You know, like you can look at these patterns in books and definitely learn a lot that way, but really immersing yourself in the culture and being able to see them firsthand, you understand so much about the impact that they're designed to create. And there's a feeling that you get from them. And when you've experienced that feeling firsthand in architecture, then you really understand what it is you're trying to convey when you're producing it in your own art.
And so was that in Cordoba?
That was in Sevilla.
Oh, okay. The feeling that you're trying to convey, are you able to put that into words for us?
I can try. It's very much a feeling of order and calm, and like there is a ubiquitous center everywhere around you. Everything is connected, and nothing is inherently more important than anything else because everything is an expression of the same origin.
The tessellation is a word that we've been putting on the screen, and it's possible that people don't know what that means. So are you able to explain it for us?
Yes, tessellation describes an aspect of shapes working together where they all fit perfectly together with no spaces. So this is something that is a really core driving force with Islamic geometric art, that all of these patterns, every shape emerges naturally from the shapes around it with no spaces in between.
And is that what you meant when you talked about it being ordered and balanced because it's all originating from the same source?
Very much. And the mathematics that underpin it are really the same mathematics that create the universe. It's the same principles that are, you know, throughout all of creation, and we're seeing them expressed graphically in this way.
Now, sometimes artists don't make the greatest mathematicians, and you've said mathematics behind it. So do you also need mathematics to do your art?
To a degree. I think that you can definitely create some simple patterns without having much of a mathematical understanding at all. And certainly craftspeople in the past have worked this way, that they've just memorized the steps to create specific patterns without much core mathematical knowledge. But we have some really great teachers now who are teaching those core principles. And when you learn that, you can apply the patterns much more appropriately in a versatile range of situations. And it's so fascinating to see those mathematical structures. Mathematics is a divine language, and I think we all benefit from studying it.
On your website, you have a little clip of you doing, I assume it's you doing some of the work, and it looks very painstaking and almost, I don't know if I should use this word, but tedious. So how do you manage to keep patient and also to keep your hands still?
I mean, I think from the outside, yes, it can sometimes appear tedious, but it's something that is so nourishing. I often compare it to, you know, eating breakfast. We get up every morning and we eat breakfast, and we don't feel like, oh, why am I doing this again? I've already done it before, because it nourishes us. So, you know, especially if I'm doing something with a lot of repetitive shapes, I feel a real connection to each shape that I'm experiencing in a new way each time. And I feel almost sad when I get to the last one to be ending my relationship with that shape. And in terms of keeping the hand steady, that's really just practice. You know, like I said, I've been working with my hands since I was maybe 4 or 5 years old.
I think I interviewed her, I can't remember how, an Islamic calligrapher who was very stressed strongly that calligraphy, Islamic calligraphy, was a kind of worship. And when you talk about feeling nourished by doing those designs, it sounds similar to me. Is that how you experience doing your work, your art?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I began in a Western tradition, which I feel encourages you as an artist to kind of put your ego first or your individuality first. And what I find so nourishing about the Islamic tradition is that it allows you to continue an artistic practice without needing to connect that to something that feeds into your ego. And I feel like you get to really put your individuality and your ego aside and just really experience this communication with divinity that is endlessly nourishing.
You've said in an interview that you think that a lot of people are curious about non-Western art, but they don't necessarily have the intellectual framework in order to be able to understand it. Are you able to elaborate for us?
Yeah, I think our contemporary framework around art and creation is so based on novelty and personality that it can be really hard for people to know what to look for or what to appreciate in art forms that don't focus on that. And I've noticed people wondering, especially when I'm doing very traditional work with patterns that I haven't designed myself. I think they're not really sure what my role as artist is, because we're just not used to thinking of artists being other than the one who creates some kind of unprecedented idea. And I think it's easier maybe to connect it to craft, but craft plays such a different role in our society. There's a hierarchy that puts art above craft, and that's not the way that it's ever been seen from an Islamic perspective. So I think there's a lot of teaching, a lot of literacy around how to approach the work before people can approach it.
Yes, right. Because if you're replicating what somebody did before you, then it's you're not creating, you said, and this is seen as unoriginal, I guess, in the Western tradition.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned about putting the ego down, but then you have to sell your work. So there has to be some kind of individuality and ego involved. How do you kind of balance and manage that?
It's always difficult to do that balance. And especially nowadays, so much of that selling happens through social media as well. And it's interesting to see how Islamic artists use social media. I think that there is a difference that you can feel, like I have connected with a lot of artists on social media, and there's no selfies. I have deep relationships with a number of my peers making Islamic art that I don't even know what they look like. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the way that you do it is you just very much put the art first, and you don't present yourself in this kind of cult of personality.
How do customers find you?
These days, primarily through Instagram. I found that really, really helpful as an outreach tool. And then, my Instagram connects to my website, so people can go there and see my work and find out what I'm working on.
And are your customers mostly Muslim, or who's buying?
Both, definitely both. I think because the form that my art takes it's primarily paintings that you can hang on a wall, or you can buy a print. And so that fits within a Western understanding of what art is, that does make the work somewhat approachable to Western audiences. They can envision hanging a painting on their wall. And I do think that increasingly it is intriguing people who are perhaps also maybe feeling a little tired of the cult of personality.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we do look forward to your beautiful works gracing our world. So thank you for joining us and sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching Canadian Muslim News. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe. God bless.